We can't hear you. Jeffrey, we cannot hear you. Jeffrey, we cannot hear you. No sound.
Mic check. Anybody?
Now we can hear you.
Well, you know, around Broadway, they do a lot of rehearsals. I guess that's what we're doing here in Chelsea this evening. So thank you all for that. For the folks online, and because this is on our YouTube channel, super high level, May Chelsea Land Use Committee meeting. Welcome, Jeffrey LaFrancois, the co-chair. My fellow co-chair, Carrie Keenan, is not here this week. She's on vacation with her family. We have a quorum present of members in the room. Our hybrid policy of the board is in effect. Tonight, we have 4 significant items of business on the agenda. I ask committee members to keep their comments succinct and efficient. Members of the public will be limited to 1 minute per topic on when we go to the public for comment. On process, we will hear from an applicant or an entity. We will then go to the committee for comments and discussion, and then we will go to the public. It will then come back to the committee to make any final comments or discussion before we move on to the next item on our agenda. Up first, we have a discussion on the City of Housing, yes, citywide text amendment on housing. We've previously taken up economic development and the environment. Our Housing, Health, and Human Services Committee is spearheading this citywide housing amendment. The Clinton Hell's Kitchen Land Use Committee took this up last week. Chelsea Land Use is taking it up tonight. It will then go to our executive committee for reconciliation. It will then get brought back before the committees, both all housing, Clinton Hell's Kitchen Land Use, and Chelsea Land Use in June, before we finally adopt a position at the end of June to transmit that to the Department of City Planning. We asked our committee members to watch the Housing Committee meeting, at which Department of City Planning spent 3.5 hours presenting that plan to them. And tonight, I'm pleased to say that we have a representative from City Planning here tonight who can answer questions from the committee, as well as some folks from the public if there's comments to be made. I gave that summary about how this proposal is a citywide text amendment to generate more housing across all boroughs and all community districts in the city. And I will say, before welcoming up Andy Cantu, that based on what is being proposed from City Planning, City of Yes Housing has 8 key components. Number 1, universal affordability preference. Allow buildings to add at least 20% more housing if the additional homes are affordable, delivering affordable housing to high-cost neighborhoods. Number 2, convert offices and other buildings to housing. Make it easier for vacant offices and other non-residential buildings to become much-needed homes. Number 3, town center zoning. Legalize housing above businesses in low-density areas. Number 4, remove costly parking mandates. Reduce housing costs by making parking optional in new buildings. Number 5, accessory dwelling units. Allow backyard cottages, garage conversions, and basement apartments, giving homeowners extra cash and providing space for multi-generational families. Number 6, transit-oriented development. Legalize 3 to 5 story apartment buildings on qualifying sites near public transit and low-density areas. Number 7, campuses. Make it easier for campuses like churches to add new buildings, bringing money for repairs, new facilities, and housing. And finally, number 8, small and shared housing. Lift restrictions on homes with shared kitchens or other facilities. I emphasize that that's the city's summary that I just delivered to you to give you some context, because we're not going to get the detailed presentation tonight. And so with that, I want to welcome up, and I'm going to take a breath after this also, Andy Cantu from the Department of City Planning to tee up a conversation and discussions around this with members of the committee. I'm going to play volley with the microphone. Andy, there's one right here for you.
Hello. Hey, everybody. My name is Andy Cantu. I'm a senior planner in the Manhattan office at the Department of City Planning. I'm joined by my colleague, John Mangan. He's the project manager on City of Yes for Housing Opportunity. He's also the director of the housing division. So if you have a question and he can't answer it, we have an issue. Again, thanks, Jeffrey, for the welcome. You got a pretty good introduction. Again, we gave a full presentation to the Housing Committee a couple of weeks ago. If you'd like to know more details on the proposal itself, please go back and review that. But tonight, we're really here to answer questions from the committee and the public on the specifics of City of Yes for Housing Opportunity. And just so we're clear for members of the public, anyone else joining, this proposal is not related to a later item on your agenda, which is for the Fulton Elliott Chelsea houses. This is a separate agenda item. So just before we get questions on that. So Without further ado, happy to take any questions from the board.
Thanks, Andy. We'll start with the committee. Does anybody, Mr. Lazarin?
The microphone? Hello? Here I am with a microphone. Okay, two questions. One, the conversion of offices to residential. There was something I read, it's illegal right now after 1961, it was construction. What's that all about?
Great question. So one component is to take existing adaptive reuse regulations, which we know and love, that enable, they provide a relaxed set of light and air standards that enable non-residential buildings to convert to residential. The catch is, one, you generally have to be a pre-61 building. There's pre-77 in lower parts of lower Manhattan. Two, it only applies in Manhattan below 60th Street and parts of Brooklyn and Queens along the East River and a few other places. So it's a limited geography. And then three, you can only convert to full-on apartments. You can't convert to shared housing or supportive housing or dorms or things like that.
Okay.
So as part of this proposal, we're proposing three big moves. One, move that cutoff date all the way up to 1991. So if you're a pre-1991 building, you can take advantage of this. Why? Because we haven't really touched the cutoff date in 30 years, so we're bringing it up to, closer to the present day. Two, taking the geography and just expanding it citywide. What happens when you go beyond central business districts? You're not talking about offices. You might be talking about, old Catholic schools or something like that, or monasteries or convents if you're in the lowest density parts of the city. We received requests from faith-based organizations to look at the regs for them as well, and it makes a ton of sense. And then finally, enabling conversion to the full range of housing types, including supportive, including shared housing, including dorms, things like that.
Okay, the 1991 is basically an arbitrary date.
No, when we've touched the date in the past, we typically go about this distance in the past to ensure that you're beyond basically one financing life cycle of a building. If it's underused or vacant, then we want to provide flexibility for those types of buildings. And this date also emerged from our office conversions task force. It was multi-agency, involved practitioners as well, sponsored by City Council. And when we look at the office stock in New York, there's a huge boom of office construction in the early 70s, in the late 80s. And so 1991 gets you beyond a big bubble of office production where some buildings are underutilized or vacant.
Thank you. My second question is the campus housing. What about, say, we have a church with lots of grounds around it and it's landmarked? How does that work?
Well, if it's landmarked, then as today, it would have to go through LPC review to add anything to the site.
Doesn't override landmark.
Doesn't override historic district review, doesn't override landmark review at all. We don't touch that at all.
Thank you.
Well, I was wondering, not so shy.
Hi, how do these proposals affect landmark districts and special zoning districts? I understand, for example, that development rights will be able to be transferred farther away from individual landmarks, which could contribute to much taller buildings being constructed right near them that would diminish them or not be contextual. And what about something like the special West Chelsea zoning district? How would this interact with that?
Those are great questions. So first off, landmark protections and historic district protections exist independently of the zoning. So we're not touching those, as I said. The one thing we are doing in the zoning for landmarks, however, is taking the existing landmark TDR program, transferable development rights program, which dates from the 1960s, the late 1960s, and we're actually making it workable. As it is today, the program enables transfers only to abutting lots or lots that would be abutting if not for a street or an intersection. So it's a really tight radius. And it requires a full special permit, which, as you guys know, that's like 2 years, couple $100,000, whatever. So in the almost 60 years that the program has been around, we've seen 12 total transfers, and only then in Midtown or in Financial District, the highest density, highest value parts of the city. There are lots of landmarks that need support around the city. And so we're trying to make this a workable source of potential revenue by doing a few things. One, expanding the radius a little bit. Today, like I said, only abutting lots or would be abutting if not for a street or intersection, and say anywhere on the landmark block you can transfer or immediately across the street or intersection from that block. So it expands it a little bit, not crazy. It's not like a half mile or anything like that. You're still in a pretty tight area, but it provides meaningful transfer opportunities. Instead of 4, which typically means none, you have, maybe a couple dozen lots that you could transfer to. Secondly, because this was made a special permit before special permits were special permits, like late 60s, that's pre-ULURP, special permit was not what it is today. We're proposing to reduce the level of procedure to an authorization, community board, city planning commission, if the receiving site needs any changes to the zoning at all in order to accommodate those development rights. So if you needed a little more height, or if you needed, to bump out into a yard or something like that, you would have to go through community board and CPC protection or review. If you don't, if those development rights can land on a receiving site without any need to change the zoning at all, then that would be a certification. And when I met with a church in Crown Heights, actually, an Episcopal church in Crown Heights a few months back, and they are ecstatic because they need a new roof. It's like leaking, it's caving in. And this would provide them meaningful opportunities, multiple parties that they can negotiate with to transfer some of their development rights, fulfill the original purpose of the mechanism, earn some revenue, and fix the roof. And it goes through LPC review as well. So you need to make sure that there's a harmonious relationship between wherever the development rights end up and the landmark. And also you need to put in place a continuing maintenance plan for the landmark. So people don't get the money and like run off to Bermuda or whatever. It has to go towards keeping the landmark in sound first-class condition.
Answer the second part of that question.
Oh, golly, can you remind? Special districts. Gotcha. So let me start with the general approach for housing opportunity to special districts. One is that we really believe in the housing opportunity proposals, and to the extent possible, we want to carry them through to the special district. For instance, the big, medium, and high density component is universal affordability preference, which enables a little bit bigger buildings as long as that increment is 100% affordable housing at 60% AMI. We do not want to leave special districts out of that proposal, the opportunity to create affordable housing. And so that's our starting point. Let's carry it through. That said, there are instances where components of the proposals are in tension with or conflict with specific planning goals embedded in special districts, in which case, the housing opportunity proposals give way, or we try to find a way to arbitrate between them. One of my favorite examples is actually in Special Clinton. So if you're in the R8 district in the preservation area, you don't get 6 FAR like R8s elsewhere. You get 4.2 today. Under UAP, Universal Affordability Preference, we propose to give R8 a little bump to 7.2, as long as anything above that 6 FAR cap today is permanently affordable housing at an average of 60% AMI. Now, if we said R8 in Special Clinton preservation area, it gets 7.2 FAR, that would obviously be a pretty dramatic increase in FAR there. So what we did instead is what we did in other districts that, that didn't have typical FARs or didn't have a higher max FAR for affordable senior housing, which is we proposed a 20% bump. So basically in R8 preservation, your market rate cap will remain 4.2, just where it is today, but we would accommodate 20% above that for permanently affordable housing. And that gets you to, I think, 5.04 or something like that. So not going to 7.2, but still providing that housing opportunity bump for affordable housing nonetheless. So that's kind of an example of how we're treating the special districts. In West Chelsea, for instance, we are swapping in UAP, simple zoning framework, for the IH programs there, which are kind of like proto IH programs, since they came along before we had our medium and high density district proposal.
Tell people what IH is.
Sorry, inclusionary housing, where your market rate is limited to here, but you can bonus up if you provide affordable housing. Under the existing IH programs, you have to provide affordable housing at 80% AMI and only 80% AMI. Typically, West Chelsea works a little different. You can go a little higher, which is atypical, but you can go to higher AMIs there too. Under UAP, we propose to take those AMIs and drive them down from 80 to 60. And then even more importantly in my book, enabling income averaging so you can create affordable units at a range of incomes. You don't need to be a family that earns exactly 79% AMI to qualify for a unit. We can create affordable units through the zoning at 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, hundreds of the cap. But it just creates more flexibility to create more affordable housing and more types of affordable housing as well. There may be little nips and tucks to the, Andy, do you remember specifics to any of the bulk regs in Special West Chelsea? What often happens is that it's like a palimpsest, like over time, we take slightly different modified approaches to things like how street walls work because our understanding of what regs work evolves. So one of the big moves we're making here is just updating things like street wall regulations to address some of the deficiencies in the past, where we have either forced street walls to line up inappropriately with neighbors or prevented them from lining up, appropriately with their neighbors. And so we've taken innovations like that and kind of carried them through special districts because we know that certain things haven't worked in the past. Do you have any more details on Special West Chelsea right now? But yeah, I went through it again before I came tonight, and most of the changes are in order to accommodate that universal affordability preference to make sure that our workhorse for affordability in medium and high density districts works with Special Clinton, works with Special West Chelsea, works with Hudson Yards.
We're gonna go online, Viren, and then Betty.
Sorry, Jeffrey. Just
Oh, go ahead, Andy.
to
I'm
add a
sorry.
bit color to that. Just one more big important thing that we're doing with special districts is that when we wrote a lot of these special districts, especially the older ones, we wrote in sort of very bespoke regulations related to things like street wall or lot coverage before we had zoning districts that accomplished these things. So what we did in a lot of instances is we're expanding those regulations citywide, like lot coverage, for example, street wall regulations. Those are becoming baked into the underlying districts. So what's happening is in a lot of special districts, we're just sort of striking through those regulations. It's not that they're going away from special districts. It's just that they're being relocated to other sections of the zoning resolution.
And that's annotated on the zoning text posted online. So you don't have to guess at what a deletion means. There'll typically be a bubble there that explains what we're up to. I was at a CB meeting not too long ago where they're like, what happened to our special street wall base height provisions? And it's like, actually, congratulations. Your street wall, your base height provisions are now the citywide standard. And so we could delete them in your special district.
Viren?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Number one, I see the small and shared apartments is included in the City of Yes plan. Do you have any provisions for unit sizes in terms of smaller units, similar to micro units? That is question number one. Is there any kind of conversation as to sort of required minimum size of the unit that's going to be put in place as part of City of Yes plan? Should I move on to the second question, or you want to sort of take one at a time?
I can answer that one.
Okay.
So we're working very closely with HPD on our small and shared housing proposals. One of the issues with small housing is that dwelling unit factor. It's in the zoning. It's effectively a minimum average unit size. So if you want to create a bunch of studios, you have to balance that out with much larger apartments as well. I remember coming to city planning and some of us scratching our heads about this, and we went back and looked at the CPC reports that created this dwelling unit factor. And it's really funny. The reports literally say we need to protect Manhattan from being overrun by stewardesses. There was this concern that all these airline stewardesses were taking apartments in Midtown, and that we needed to like stop developments full of small units so that, you know, we could preserve a place for, you know, larger households in Manhattan. You know, we see a lot of new development that we see, especially in places like Manhattan, will include development, unit sizes that are above what the dwelling unit factor is, but it does prevent projects that might want to provide a type of housing that's like a throwback, you know, smaller units, no frill studios that could be a landing spot for recent college graduates, or appropriate for smaller households or older households, or in some cases marginally housed households. We don't want to prevent that in the zoning, especially because, and back to your basic question, there are rules in Housing Maintenance Code, Building Code, Americans with Disabilities Act, and other places that basically create a minimum unit size already. And so there's no reason to have a redundant set of regulations in the zoning, which is ultimately supposed to be land use regulation rather than regulation of things like unit size. And so we're proposing to eliminate dwelling unit factor within the existing transit zone, which includes all of Manhattan and much of the, you know, outer lying boroughs. And then beyond that, reducing it to 500. So it would be effectively a minimum average unit size of 500 beyond that. Do we expect this to unleash the market and all anybody will build small units again? Actually, absolutely not. We did an analysis. We spoke with practitioners and everything like that, especially in Manhattan. That won't be the case, but it will provide opportunities on the margin for projects that serve this really underserved niche, which is apartments for smaller households.
And just when you say 500, you mean square feet?
Yes.
And what is the reg today?
In Manhattan, it's 680 is great question, but that is the dwelling unit factor today. So minimum average unit size of about 680.
Viren, back to you for your second question.
Yeah, no, part of the same question. So micro units, which are much smaller than 500 square feet, is not included in the City of Yes text amendment.
We would let building code, housing maintenance code, ADA control, which gets you to probably like 400 and some, you know, it varies a little bit. It's not a hard and fast rule, but that's where you end up.
Okay, I understand. I think
Final question, Viren.
Yeah, no, I just have two other questions very quickly. One is it would be good to sort of include smaller size units similar to micro units, because Manhattan-like places actually have much larger number of single member households than other boroughs. Brooklyn and Queens follow, as you know. The second question I have is 60 AMI. Is that something that sort of grounded in stone, or is there something that can be lowered? Because that basically excludes many families that really need affordable housing. So I'm not quite clear if with 60, how do you sort of manage income levels? And last but not the least question that I have, because with 60, what you have is a very good housing protection program, and that's very good for the city. So I'm not sort of questioning that. I'm hoping that maybe the AMI can be further reduced to include other sort of low income families. And the caveat that I would throw in there is one shoe fits all is not the way to go about it. Maybe there is a way in which you apply this approach in different ways in different communities, because not everything is going to work exactly the same way across 5 boroughs. Thank
you. That's a great question. So many of you are familiar with what's happened to AMIs in recent years, which is they've gone up a lot. 80% AMI today isn't what it used to be. And so we saw it as absolutely crucial to include lower AMIs in our zoning programs that create affordable housing, hence 80 to 60. But to your question, how do we reach lower income households while still creating a feasible program that developers and housing providers can actually use? And that's where income averaging comes in. So we expect to see, if our previous zoning programs like MIH are any indicator, units at probably 3 bands per project. So maybe 60 with some at 30 and some at 90, or 60 with some at 40 and some at 80. If we're talking 30% AMI through zoning programs, That's like $1,000 for a new construction 2-bedroom. So that is something that we are extremely proud of. And this is for privately financed mixed income development. No HPD subsidy at all. There will always, of course, be developments that participate with HPD in their term sheet programs that reach even lower incomes through things like the ELA program, or some of the senior affordable housing programs like SARA. So we feel great about this zoning framework, and it can work in conjunction with subsidy programs to do even more.
Betty?
Hi, good evening. I'm interested in an affordable housing unit count or expectation. What do you have you made statistics on how much affordable housing might result in these changes of these measures, and which measure might result in the most affordable units? And I'm also wondering, perhaps you have it in your data, how the conversion of the office buildings to residential is going to work for affordable housing.
Those are great questions. So first off, estimates of affordable units. Because UAP basically clicks into the existing zoning framework, we haven't mentioned it here, but if you saw the presentation, you would see that the idea behind it is most medium and high density districts today have a preference for senior affordable housing alone. We asked ourselves, what if we just extended that preference, larger size for the building, to all forms of affordable and supportive housing? So, we just said, okay, market rate stays where it is, but we're floating affordable and supportive FARs a little higher. Because it works with the existing zoning framework, we could do this little thought experiment where we said, okay, what if UAP had been in place since 2014? And we could assume that 100% affordable buildings would be a little bit bigger and remain 100% affordable. We can assume that mixed income projects would be a little bit bigger, but stay, mixed income at the same proportions. And we found that we would have created 20,000 additional income restricted units at an average of 60% AMI, which is more than all of our zoning programs for affordable housing have created since the 1980s when they were first instituted. So this has the power to be a true workhorse. And like many aspects of this proposal, the secret sauce is geography. For the first time ever, we're doing things in every neighborhood, from the lowest density neighborhoods to the highest density neighborhoods. And this is a big city. And so our environmental review, for instance, shows that we expect, on average, less than 1 unit per acre over 15 years. But because the city is so big, that adds up to 110,000 new units of housing, including tens of thousands of income restricted units. So the geography is the secret sauce for UAP as for all the other components as well. Conversions, sorry. I can turn down the verbosity a little bit if that's if people prefer. Conversions, the short answer, why aren't there affordability requirements for conversions in the zoning? One is because we're building off the existing framework, which doesn't have those requirements too. We're just expanding. Second, in order to get affordable, we've been lobbying hard at the state level for a tax benefit for affordable housing and conversions, and we got it. It's, I think, one of the biggest wins of the state legislative session is that for the first time in history, we have a tax benefit that can support affordable housing and conversions. And word on the street is that people are going to use it. And so we're going to get 25% affordable in many conversions. There's an accelerator provision in there too. You get a bigger benefit the sooner you go, the sooner you move. If you start by the end of 2026, it's a bigger benefit than if you wait until 2028, for instance. So we expect to see a lot of these in the pipeline soon.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer.
Marty?
Thanks, Betty.
Thank you. Good evening. I got to start by saying that I'm not an expert in this stuff, and I'm sure I'm speaking for some of my colleagues. I looked at the presentation that you made to the other committee, the 3-hour job. And I said, how do I take in all that information? And I'm finding that I cannot. I have questions that pick at little parts of it. I guess the underlying piece is, who's making the money from this? Why would a developer, and I presume you're looking at developers, take any of this on? And that goes with the changes in FAR. I saw one table in which there was a change in the FAR, but the new units were for affordable much fewer than for market. And then the AMI ranges that you've been talking about, I'm not that much of an ignoramus that I can't use the alphabet soup like AMI. The alphabet ranges were, the AMI ranges were, they're small. They don't cover, do they cover 3 families? Are you building any 3-family apartments? Does the AMI ever go up above 100? And there was a lot of that discussion that you had the other day, but much of it isn't in my wheelhouse.
Okay, thank you. That's a great question, actually. Like, why would anybody build a bigger building if all they can do is 100% affordable housing at an average of 60% AMI? And this is something that we've learned over the decades with our affordable housing programs, is that they need to work in conjunction with a tax benefit at the state level that supports mixed income affordable housing. So as we were devising UAP as an evolution of our zoning programs, we were also working with and hoping and praying and biting our fingernails about whether or not a workable tax benefit program would be created at the state level in order to support UAP. And, you know, I think we ended up in a pretty good place. The way that it works is developers want to get the tax benefit, which requires them to provide a certain percentage of affordable housing. Once they're there at the store, they will use the zoning program to do a somewhat bigger building, which also drives the AMIs down to, you know, a better level. So those 2 programs work together to create more and better affordable housing than either program does alone. And this is, like I said, is an evolution of our understanding about how to make affordable housing work through the zoning. Our inclusionary programs in the past, if there was no tax benefit available or necessary for them to build, then we did not see people take up our zoning programs. If, however, a benefit was available, then they did take it up. And so this represents, I would say, the apotheosis of that approach. Let's work together in order to create more and better affordable housing, you know, city and state together. And so this builds on that.
One follow-up, because I want to make sure we have time for discussion.
The follow-up is, you use the word permanent, and what does permanent mean? Is that forever?
For life of the building. Yeah. So until, you know, some point in the future and it falls down, that unit would be required to remain affordable at its designated AMI.
Thank you. I have a question. You talk about the parking, so you're going to reduce it so it's not mandatory when people build a new building, they don't have to have a certain amount of parking. How does that affect public housing? For example, Fulton and Chelsea Elliott, if they are torn down and rebuilt, do they lose parking as well with this new plan?
Well, I mean, in the Manhattan core today, which is Manhattan Community Districts 1 through 8, there are no parking requirements for new housing already. So we're kind of building on that for the rest of the city by making parking optional. What we're not doing is eliminating parking requirements for existing housing. We're providing a pathway for them to eliminate it, but that involves public review and getting approval from the City Planning Commission and from the Community Board as well. The thinking there is, if you're a tenant of a multifamily building with a parking space, we don't want landlords just to be able to unilaterally kick you out of that parking lot. We want to make sure that there's some public review so that people have a say in that. But for new housing, parking will be optional. We expect that folks will continue to provide it the farther out in the city that you are, but in more central locations, it will rebalance the relationship between parking and housing and result in more housing, as we've seen in other jurisdictions around the country.
So they'll probably lose a lot of their parking.
In
Fulton, because it's going to be demolished.
I don't
and
know the
rebuilt.
specifics of that, but I know that in my 10 years of city planning, I've worked with NYCHA on dozens of mayoral zoning overrides where they have to go through a long process in order to do 100% senior affordable on an empty parking lot. And so it would, streamline that process for them. a
Thank
little
you.
bit. Yeah.
Thanks, Inga. So before I go to the public, and I'm guessing there's a Joe Restucci is here, Maria Ortiz is here from other committees. Paul Devlin has been through this presentation for the third time as well. I wanted to provide just some summary on where the rest of the board is. So if you guys want to take a beat for a second, I'm going to do that. If you want to, you may get called back up. I'll take that mic in the meantime, which may elicit some more ideas from you guys in terms of what we can then transmit, excuse me, to the rest of our committees. So as I mentioned, housing took this up, and that was very specific conversations as it relates to special districts. For the public, we have a lot of special districts in Manhattan CB4. I think there's 6 or 7, maybe more just in our district alone. And that governs a lot of what can and cannot happen in that area alone. One of the things that folks are concerned about is this, because this is a citywide text amendment, things would then apply to a special district that don't typically do or are currently exempt from doing so. So a lot of these bonus provisions would for the first time be relevant in a special district. And that raised a lot of discussion points and concerns at the Housing Committee and in Clinton and in the Hell's Kitchen Land Use Committee as well. And I'm hearing threads of it also happen here as it relates to both our historic district in the heart of Chelsea, and then the special West Chelsea district as well. Sort of imagine that Highline corridor and the provisions of that. So something that we need to kind of think about is whether or not we would be comfortable with the idea of the bonuses that are being proposed that would also apply to the first time ever for a special district. Our other colleagues have really driven a point home on that. They would not be comfortable with that. And so that's something I want to figure out. We're online with it. We're going to transmit that to our colleagues as well. And that then we sort of find a topic. What I'm trying to do here is both use this time efficiently to get through a big topic so we can get this forward this evening. That was a major, major factor that for the first time ever, broad provisions that would be in effect across the city would also be subject to making changes, be they big or small, within special districts. Speaking of special districts, the historic districts, David, you were mentioning about how would they still sort of reign? Yes, they would still reign, but at the end of the day, it's still LPC. And if, zoning is increased in a particular district, LPC would then be considering that envelope within what is being proposed in that application. So it's something we would have to think about as it relates to what the relationship between an owner, a zoning application, LPC, and sort of all the oversight and purview with that as well. We certainly heard the examples that were made about churches around the city. We've certainly experienced that in Chelsea with the seminary. And so how will that play out elsewhere around the district is something for us to be thinking about. Some other conversion, I think universally, maybe I'll take a head nod, is a very good thing. The provisions that both the state is putting into effect and the city is proposing, this I think is much as long overdue. Is there some general sense of a yes on that from folks? I'm just trying to glean some opinion from my colleagues. Is this totally not anything that we want to talk about? And like, a shoulder shrug, conversions, we're okay. Okay. Town center zoning doesn't really apply here. Inga, we'll talk about the parking stuff later when we actually get to NYCHA. I'll go to that. I just don't want to dwell on that now. I guess, do folk raise your hand? Is there something you want to make sure we transmit to exec? And then I'm going to go to the public. Besides sort of what has already been laid out, of which there is a lot that has already been laid out, both from the Housing and Hell's Kitchen committees. And I can tell you that much of that, while Hell's Kitchen doesn't have a specific historic district, I think we all recognize that the special Clinton district has sort of in effect acted like one. And while it's zoning and land use protections, it's also extended a particular historic protection overlay as well. And so much of what was talked about and what I say is the North Country certainly applies down here as well. I want to first go to members of the public, and then I'm going to ask Joe to say a couple of things, and Paul, if you have anything. But then I've set my timer this evening, and it's going to go off very shortly to wrap this up, so we can then go on to the next topics of our agenda, provided folks are comfortable with that. So if you have a comment to make on City of Yes housing, did we have a? Okay, that's okay. If you want to comment on City of Yes housing, you can either raise your hand or you guys can line up. We'll do it from that side of the room. I'll bring a mic over. Is anybody here to make a comment on the City of Yes housing text note that we're taking up this evening? Excellent. I see 2 hands. If you guys want to stand up, come right over here. So you're on the camera online as well. I'll bring a mic over. Sure. Better microphone, better camera view. Just please introduce yourself. Let us know where you live. And you have 1 minute on the clock.
Thanks so much. I'm Brad Hargraves. I live on 21st Street in Chelsea between 7th and 8th. I've been in the neighborhood for 15 years. I have 2 kids at PS 11 and a third on the way. I'm a homeowner. And I'm here to speak in support of City of Yes. One of the things I love about this city is we are a refuge for all sorts of people, for strivers, for the trans kid who fled his house in Alabama, for someone who wants to come here and join a rock band or get into theater. And that is a promise and that is a value of who we are in New York City and what the city stands for. But that value is hollow when a 1-bedroom apartment in Manhattan costs $4,500 a month. That's a hollow value. It means nothing. And so one of the reasons, the main reason why that 1-bedroom is $4,500 a month is we've been underbuilding housing for the better part of 50 years since the 1961 zoning code choked housing production in New York City. You look back how much housing we used to build in the first half of the 20th century versus what we build today. It's night and day. The City of Yes is a step in the right direction to getting back to that welcoming city that I love, where someone can come to New York from any place and make a life here and make this city a wonderful place. Thank you all so much for giving me the time today.
Thanks, Brad, with 1 second to spare. Next speaker. Please introduce yourself and let us know where you live.
Hi, my name is Sam Deutsch, and I live on 9th Avenue in Chelsea, and I'm here to express strong support for City of Yes. I care a lot about the climate. I worked in the Senate on climate policy, and one of the most effective things that local governments can do to reduce carbon emissions is to legalize denser housing in places like New York, where you don't need a car, where heating needs are less because you have shared walls, all that good stuff. And so I'm really excited about City of Yes, but what really excites me the most is the transit-oriented development aspects and the elimination of parking minimums. I think it's about time that we embrace these policies. All over the country, it's happening. In Vancouver, they're actually legalizing 20-story buildings near transit. So New York only doing 3 to 5 is actually, you know, just a small step in the right direction there, but still nonetheless very exciting, and really hope that this passes and look forward to what it will do for the city. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. We're going to go online. If you could please introduce yourself and let us know where you live.
Sure. Hi, my name is Gabriel Doherty. I live in this community board 4, but actually in Clinton on 44th Street. I just had a brief comment, which is in support of the UAP. I think it is important for us to consider, even with this conversation around special districts, that UAP only works when it is truly universal. I think we'll have other districts across the city asking for exceptions, and I'd just like to encourage us all to remember that this really only works, the housing production only works when housing can be produced everywhere across the city. Yeah, and that's all I'd like to say. Just a brief comment. Thank you so much.
Appreciate the brevity. Thank you. Jesse, was there somebody else online as well? Eric?
Hi, Eric
introduce yourself and let us know where you live.
Sure, Eric Eisenberg. I live in the I think the geographic center of Hell's Kitchen. I'm a member of the New York Clean Air Collective. I'm generally very much in support of this City of Yes proposals. With respect to parking minimums, I would like to see more done towards eliminating parking minimums for existing buildings. I think as a matter of equity, probably if somebody, an individual tenant, has a parking space, they should be compensated if it's taken, but there shouldn't be provisions to allow them to hold up the conversion of parking space to non-parking space. Parking creates an enormous negative externality for the community because it increases the amount of traffic, increases the amount of congestion. And there's no reason the government needs to mandate the continued existence of parking when it could go to a better use, like housing or like community facilities where that's economically viable. So I would ask that everything be done to as broadly get rid of parking minimums. Thank you.
Thanks for being here tonight. Was there anybody else online, Jesse? Any of the members of the public? Thank you guys for being here. For the committee, going to wrap this up in a discussion. Joe, just a couple of points because I want to be moving on to our next topic, please.
I will certainly give a couple of points for the committee. First and foremost, I do not represent Open New York. I am here for 45 years in our district, and I want to make the following points. Report from the Housing Committee. Tonight, unfortunately, I saw an incredible PR version of what this is. Let's get really clear from the Housing Committee point of view, and certainly from Land Use Committee. This is an increase of 20% of bulk of existing districts. It means between 2 to 4 stories or more in certain districts, including our special zoning districts. What city planning has left out of this discussion, which infuriates me sitting here, is that we as a community have been at the forefront of asking to create affordable housing and accepting density, and actually through our affordable housing plan, proposing more density to create more housing, both market rate and affordable. We've done that by calibrating. This location gets more density, this location is lower, back and forth. The Clinton Special Zoning District from 1973 said you preserve a central series of blocks, a preservation area, and along 8th Avenue and along West 42nd, you have high-rise density, which also has an affordable housing component. So that means we looked at as a community at the whole community, not just one thing. When anyone stands up here and says, if it's universal, that makes the difference, the minimal, based upon the calculations that DCP set forward, on acreage, that's what we had nothing else to go with. One of our members, Roberta, came up with this, that the acreage and community board 4 through this universal affordability preference would produce 1,000 units. We have produced thousands and thousands of units through our rezonings that we've supported and done carefully nuanced things, whether it's Hudson Yards or the Garment Center or in West Chelsea. In West Chelsea, every single height limit, both for the base of a building and for the overall height, would change. We went through this in 2005 to figure out, oh, more bulk on the north, more bulk on 10th Avenue. Jeffrey and I spoke today, for example. Not every building on 10th Avenue that was built has affordability, but they bought off-site affordability certificates because that's how the law worked at that point. So I am, and the Housing Committee is certainly in favor of a lot of tenets of this plan. Conversion of buildings, the dwelling unit factor getting changed, not entirely eliminated, because we asked the question, could a building be 100% studios? And there's an idea somewhere that in Manhattan, everyone lives in a studio. I think people do actually have relationships, they get married, they have children, and having a building that is a mixture of units is helpful. We need to have it adjusted, not just eliminate it. Shared housing. Our board is at the forefront for this, for saying like SROs, shared bathrooms and kitchens. We asked a question of DCP, but does that mean every single room would have its own rent stabilized lease? They were not sure. They said they were going to get back to us. So it's these kind of things that it's the details and how you do it that makes the difference. But from the point of view of the special zoning districts, the current proposal is from the 2 committees so far is an existential threat. And that's a problem. And how we deal with it and work with them, we got to figure it out. And our goal is to figure out a response that says we did these special zoning districts to accomplish a myriad of things. And that's because we as a community said, we will take the density. We want affordable housing and we have an affordable housing plan. So I asked this committee, as you are engaging with it, it's going to run through housing, come back again in June, come up with your questions for the May exec meeting. Any questions that you have, we're incorporating them into a letter to go to DCP so they can give us clarification. There were things they were trying to figure out. And then we're going to have just a structure of a letter presented at the June board meeting, because we're not going to adopt this in full until the exec meeting in June, because our deadline is, the time frame is too short. So we can't go back to the July board. It'll be after their letter has to come in. So this is a complicated thing. And I'm sorry, this was such a sell job tonight. I'm very disappointed because that's not what we got. We got a very good open back and forth discussion at housing and we talked about further at land use. So just take that into account. Thanks.
Thanks, Joe. I will take the fault of the sale job because that was me in getting city planning to come this evening, not allowing them to present. So I recognize the fact that it was very truncated and that not all the information was put out there this evening, because I am also in agreement that that we couldn't have as full of a conversation because there wasn't the 45 slides on the screen to take everybody through, right? Like that's very real. It's also the nature of how community boards engage. We chose to do this process. I've done this process before and I'm very excited that we'll be sort of running it through that way again. What I'm committing to, and as we always do, is taking back what we've talked about, running it through our process, which is exec, then through housing, my phone's going off. And then back here, mid-June to take up at exec end of June. As we laid out, there's a lot of concerns. I think one thing that is pretty important and is a challenging needle to thread is the fact that we have always been a pro-housing board. How do we take a position on a citywide text amendment to drive more housing across 5 boroughs, but also be cognizant of the fact of the sensitivities that sort of take place on each block, in our backyard, across the street, and uptown and downtown with MCB4. So it is a challenge. We take on a lot of challenges. I think, in an ideal world, I think Joe and I would be holding hands and bowing if city planning adopted our affordable housing plan as is proposed. They're not going to do that, but we're going to fight to make sure that sort of it's acknowledged and that we are inserting as much as we can at the table. So know that this is coming back. There'll be more to have on it, another go round. Appreciate you guys and your thoughts on it tonight, Joe, for being here. City planning, thank you for coming. Always more to come from Board 4 on this topic, so stay tuned. And to the members of the public who tuned in, thank you for that. Now, we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda. It's time to breathe. Leave if you don't want to stay for the next item on the agenda. No disrespect to anybody who came here for item 1. We will. Yes, thank you. Questions will be in writing after our exec meeting, so that way we have time to get them back. We'll go from there. Up next, an item on our agenda, LPC application for 415 West 22nd Street to convert the building to a single-family residence with a partial 5th floor addition and rear extension. The presentation will be given by Tom Clabber from KDA. Actually, man, this rehearsal night in Chelsea. I apologize, everybody. It's fair. We should have done it. The item 3 is going to go a lot faster than item 2. So we're going to do item 3 before we do item 2, which I know is why the bulk of people are here, and I apologize for that. But let's just get through item 3, 402 West 20th Street. It's an application for an iron gate replacement at 402 West 20th Street, aka the Donac. Do we have anybody here for that, Jesse? Ah.
My name is Tom Gilman from Gilman Architects. Good evening. I'm Tom Gilman from Gilman Architects. Thanks so much for making time this evening. Really close? Okay. Third time's a charm. Good evening. I'm Tom Gilman from Gilman Architects. Thank you all for making the time this evening. 402 West 20th Street is a project I've had the real pleasure to work on for the last few years. It's a historic building from 1897. We've been restoring it, renovating it. Parts had not been renovated. I think one of the kitchens was original from 1897. A little scary. We're proposing, there were some violations of work that was done in the 1980s. A historic stoop was gutted and removed, and 6-foot metal gates were put up around it. We're taking those out. Jesse? You can keep going. Yeah, this is the location. Keep going. Yeah, keep going. Keep going. Yeah. So if you see here in the image, this is the building. It has that handsome curved facade. The 6-foot gate is not contextual, and there were violations from landmarks from the 1980s. There was a new owner that came in, and we're fixing those. Another view. Yep. That's the original tax photo from the 1940s. Yep. Okay, so this just shows a little bit of what's going on here. The existing conditions drawing is on the left. On the right, we're going to restore those low walls on either side of the stoop. It's a very kind of gracious, low slope. It's not a typical stoop that goes straight up. It's a couple steps, flat place, another couple steps, another flat place. It's honestly more suburban in nature than urban. But we're going to restore that. We're removing all those 6-foot gates around it. A side view. Yep. 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 Okay, so this is sorry, we just a couple back. And maybe one more back actually. We're proposing for that opening for the gate to put in a gate for basic security so that people aren't kind of wandering into the front door of the building. This is a part of a stretch of 600 feet of these low 3-foot metal gates that goes from avenue to avenue. This is the only section that wouldn't have it. So we're proposing to infill a 9-foot gate, and we're going to have it match the historic gate from 1897 and fence right next to it. That's hand wrought iron. A blacksmith actually hammers those leaves and other components together, which we've lined up for the project. That's a detail of some of it, a lot of paint on there, but you can see some of the swivels and details. It's very handsome. Yeah. Okay, and this is just a picture of the gate, a drawing of it. There'll be an opening in the middle. It's 3 feet tall. It has these beautiful leaf details throughout. And another detail as well. We have 5 different precedents in the area, just outside of CB4, where similar things were done. All approved by landmarks and installed. Okay, any questions? Happy to.
Questions from the committee. First to David.
When was the existing gate installed?
Not 100% sure, but the photos we have and the records we have, we believe that it was from 1897 when the building was built.
No, you're showing a historic photo from 1940 that
I'm sorry,
doesn't
you
show
mean
them
the
there.
6-foot metal gate?
Yeah, the gate, not the fence.
Yeah, the violations are from 1984. We don't know when before that was installed.
Okay.
Paul?
In your list of previously approved fences and gates, wasn't there one directly across the street at 403, 405? That building, we debated whether or not to approve gates on that building, and we took a position against them, but the LPC approved them. Is that a different?
I'm not sure those were among the ones shown.
Those are not the ones shown. Is there any reason you didn't select the ones that are directly across the street from you?
I'm not aware of the case you're talking about. I genuinely just don't know about it.
Sorry. Nope. Any other questions from the committee? Members of the public? Anybody on the, okay. You can take a seat. There may be like a technical question, but now we're just gonna discuss, make a proposal. Do we have something to move on this with folks anymore? David?
Yeah, this is similar to a project that we reviewed a year or two ago where gates were proposed in the General Theological Seminary row houses across the street because it was reported that someone had, kind of made a home on one of the stoops, and we resisted that. And one of our points is that, first of all, the seminary didn't tend to have other gates like that. And even though you're showing gates in the area, they tend to be associated with early 19th century row houses. Apartment buildings of this age, 1897, or even apartment buildings period, don't tend to have gates in front of them. And I think what we're looking at is kind of a policing problem that's trying to be addressed with an architectural solution. You didn't mention anything about the history of the house. It was actually built by Angelica Faber, who was a daughter of Don Alonzo Cushman, who built Cushman Row a short distance away. His descendants all had the real estate bug, and eventually that led to the Cushman Wakefield company. The Donak was named for Don Alonzo Cushman. That's where the title comes from. It has this really graceful concave entrance that sets back to the front gardens of Cushman Row and the rest of the row houses on 20th Street. And even the bay window in that concave section steps down. It's not full height, so the building reads as if it's stepping down and deferring to the adjacent row houses. It's really a masterful piece of architecture, and it's by C.P.H. Gilbert, who ended up being one of the great Gilded Age architects in New York. He became a major mansion designer, designed the Warburg Mansion on Fifth Avenue that's now part of the Jewish Museum. He designed the apartment buildings directly across 9th Avenue from the seminary, Chelsea Court and Chelsea
David,
Court
I'm gonna ask only because of the rest of our agenda that do you have a motion that you want to make? I recognize the history is rich and there's context that's at play.
One more
So what's our motion?
One more point. The cheek walls actually serve as a terminus for the wrought iron gate. And that concave entrance, it's all about openness. It would be a real shame to lose that and to kind of go against a really notable architect's original design. I would make a motion to oppose this for reasons similar to the ones that we did across the street. Anyone want to second that motion?
Wait a second, is there discussion on the motion? Paul?
I'm going to take the same position I took on the last application, that we denied the gates, whereas I thought they were appropriate. I thought they did blend in. The presentation here does talk about the fact that it's a full avenue to avenue length of fencing along here. This would be the only gap. And the argument that was presented last year against the gates was that it was not like across the street where there was a continuous row of fences. So last year I took a position against the denial. And in fact, LPC did approve them. I went by to look at them today. You can't tell that they're new. So my position is to vote against the denial and rather, if that fails, make a motion to approve.
Thanks.
There are apartment buildings on 20th Street, apartment buildings like this one that don't have gates. It's the Greek Revival row houses from the early 19th century that are the ones that do have the gates. And it's very hard to find any apartment building in the Chelsea Historic District at all that has a gate. I think it sends a really kind of unfortunate message. And the reason I asked the question about when the earlier ones were installed, I think that, before 1984, the neighborhood was a lot different and that gate might have served a more vital purpose.
So any other comments on the motion to deny the gates? Pamela?
Yes. Hi. Is it on?
Yes. Close to your mouth, forward like this.
And hold
Thank
it
you,
this
Ms.
way.
Wolf.
Thank you very much. Yes, I will agree with David on this. I would oppose any gate. I would like to give a little bit more history on this, very
Brief,
briefly.
please.
Very briefly. The former owner of the house was a friend of mine. And when she first purchased it, I know that she was very nervous about the openness of the front of the house. And she had the gates installed back in the 1980s. They are unattractive. They are forbidding. And I agree that the building needs to have an open front appearance and that would be very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to call the question. The motion is to deny the application for the gates to be installed at 402 West 20th Street. All in favor? Raise your hand in the room. Online cameras on to vote, please. All in favor of denial?
Mike, you not have your hand up?
But Mike, you're not voting yes right now, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. All opposed? Please raise your hand if you're opposed to the application. 4. Any abstentions? Bjorn, didn't you vote yes?
Jeffrey, I didn't hear the second question. Can you repeat that, please?
So the motion is to deny the application for the gates to be installed. So a yes vote would deny the gates. So is that a yes vote from you, Viren, or an abstention? Thank you. That's a yes. We were on abstentions. Mr. Noble, were you abstaining? Thank you. Any abstentions in the room? Present, not eligible? 7-4-1. Who's opposed? No, she voted yes. Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. Next up, 415 West 22nd Street to convert a building to a single-family residence with a partial fifth floor addition and rear extension. The presentation will be given by Tom Clabber from KDA, I believe. Tom, are you online? Okay. This is an extensive slide deck. I'm going to encourage Mr. Clabber to be succinct. There's a lot of important information in here. A lot to learn. I know there's also a lot of concerns, both from the committee and a lot of members of the public. So Tom, if you'll take us through, we'll then go through questions at the end. Please introduce yourself and dive right in. And if I'm interrupting you, it's to sort of keep you on scope and not sort of creeping away too far from what is germane to the committee. So Tom, over to you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Tom Clabber. I am the founding partner of KDA, here to talk about 415 West 22nd Street. So we sit on the northern side of the Chelsea Historic District Extension on 22nd Street between 9th and 10th. We are 3 lots in. We have the bookend building on 9th Avenue, then 411, and then our lot. As all of you, I'm sure, know, fairly typical Chelsea street, with some varying heights and widths, but fairly consistent down the block. We can see from the 1940s, this building was originally built in 1856, and then by 1940, when we have documentation, some of its charm had already started to deteriorate. As we can see, the 413 side of the property had already lost its brownstone rustification and its sills and lintels. We still have some evidence of the planting balcony on the 2nd floor and the protruding cornice, which we believe to be original. And then by 1980, everything has been was removed. So these buildings were built together for the same client and have been owned, we believe, by the same owner throughout their lives. And in some cases have already been combined. We found doors in between these structures. Jumping forward to today, we can see that some of the detail has been reintroduced, particularly to the west side of the property, the 415 side. We have the brownstone lintels and stills and the ground floor rustification, again, reinstalled on the building. We have a continuous cornice at the top, not a protruding cornice, but a in-between medium ground continuous cornice across the top. The rear, which we will have plenty of time to talk about, has undergone significant alterations throughout its life. Quickly, again, looking at the block, again, relatively consistent, but we do have a mix of heights and widths, rear extensions and roof additions down 22nd Street. Looking at that in 3D, here we can see the other roof additions on the block. Here, of course, is our site, and we like to point out that the buildings directly behind our building are not in the district, so our donut is already compromised here. This is a diagram, not highly detailed, but just a general diagram about the scope that we are talking about here, which is, as stated, to add a partial 5th floor addition, a partial rear addition to the existing extension, and to rebuild the rear facade. So we want to point out that we are not changing the building footprint. We are raising the existing extension up, but the building footprint remains the same. We are not proposing any decks or porches out past the line that would match our neighbors at 419 or 421. And even the decks at 417 also extend past us there. So to look at that in hardline, the basics of the front facade that are visible from 22nd Street are fairly straightforward. They are to reinstall the brownstone lintels and stills across the windows, new windows in existing openings, patch and repair the brick as we can, reintroduce a protruding cornice at the top, and reinstall or rebuild a planting balcony on the second floor. New front doors to match what we believe to be the doors from the 1940 photo, and continue the revocable consent and gated front areaway across the entire property. The addition is now stucco, so it's a stucco addition. We can look at the setbacks for the partial fifth floor with a standing seam metal bulkhead roof. To look at this in context, we can see our neighbors down to the west have similar additions to the one that we are proposing. In our early talks with LPC, they wanted to confirm we weren't creating a building that was out of character in width or girth for Chelsea. And of course, there are plenty of examples of double wide buildings, combined buildings. These are examples just from our block. Material, again, the front facade is patched to repair existing. The brownstone, which is a fairly gray variant, is what we are proposing to keep on the front, and minimal patching and repairing down on the ground floor. The rooftop addition, we are now proposing to be in a gray stucco with black metal railings and standing seam metal bulkhead. The front areaway is mostly staying as is. We are looking to extend the areaway across the entire property. So it would mean the elimination of the intermediary railing and introducing a new bluestone paving in that area. So here we can see we have protection up over the existing railing, but we are looking to extend the railing across the 413 side. Here in context, here is our property and the existing gates along the north side of 22nd Street, and they're filling in there. Our neighbors to the to the east have similar detailing as our building, and so that iron detailing is the same that we would look to continue across the front. Look at that in plan. Again, fairly straightforward proposal just to extend the areaway across the front of the building and provide a new access gate on the center line of the entry stoop. We are proposing to replace the doors underneath the stoops and to reinstall an iron gate railing that has currently been replaced with a doorway. So we're moving the envelope of the building back to the original line and reinstalling an iron gate on this underside of the stoop. So this is the existing section. There are very tight head heights on the garden level, so there is a small resectioning where we're taking some of the head height from the second floor to place on the garden level and redo the roof. So the proposed section, here you can see the view line from across the street. We'll take a look at that in a second. And here's the overlay of the proposed versus existing bulk. There was some concern about the double height entryway being proposed in the front. LPC asked us to do a quick study to see if that would be visible. It will be nearly impossible to tell. Only a very small area of the side of a stair railing would be noticeable from the block. This red line here indicates the top of the ceiling level. There's almost no visibility into the double height space from the street. Taking a quick look at the setbacks, we are set back at least 15 feet from the front of the building, as much as 18.5, and about 5 feet, 4 feet 10 from the rear of the building. We built a mock-up. Originally, we did not believe we were going to need a bulkhead. DOB disagreed, so you can see the line of the bulkhead. The only modification is this railing in the front is not required anymore. So this bulkhead, though higher, actually reduces the overall visibility of the structure, and we can take a look at that in the renderings. So we do like to point out that we are completely invisible, except for the cornice, of course, on 22nd Street, directly across the street, and down the block, our addition is not visible. Though we do have some visibilities once you step south of the corner on 9th Avenue. This is not our mock-up. This is the building that you see on 23rd Street beyond. So our addition will be visible, but not taking up any visible area by sky. It's going to be taking up and sitting in front of the already visible taller building on 23rd Street. So here is the zoom up mock-up of that. Again, here are the antennas of that taller building on 23rd Street. This view is our best approximation of what it feels like from eye level. We've highlighted the visible part of the addition, and here is the rendering of what it would look like from more or less the worst case scenario on the south side of 9th Avenue. Moving to the north, there is a gap between the two bookend buildings that provide a small view of the rear facade of the addition as well. We have the top of 411 that blocks the entire rear facade, so we have this sliver. You can see that our neighbors' additions are already visible through this gap, but ours will now be blocking theirs. And so this represents to us the worst case visibility from the north side of the avenue through the gap of this building. Of course, this building not being in the district. Because of the way 23rd Street is relationship to 24th Street, you can continue to see a sliver of that building as you step back through the park and to 24th Street. Nearly imperceptible, but the view corridor does extend to 24th Street. Quick look at the rear. So again, we have the existing extension on the rear, along with a two-story staircase and added chimney and various other modifications, windows being extended and shrunken, ACs being installed, staircase in the rear. Here are our neighbors. Here is 419 and 421 coming out to the 30-foot rear yard line, and then 417 stepping back slightly with their larger decks, and then 411 with their large rear yard bulk. So looking at the building from the rear, here we have the addition along with our friends to the west, and basically a new composition for the rear facade that encompasses built-in outdoor space. So this is not all indoor space. There are balconies built in and open space in this, which we will take a quick look at. Obviously, these decks and porches are a very important part of the donut and character here. And so our feeling was these built-in decks and porches were something that the building wanted to incorporate. And the other thing we looked at was the 442 West 22nd Street, just to get a basic idea of how to be respectful to the Chelsea buildings. So similarly here, we step back on the fourth floor, the top floor, back to the original line of building, and then step back again for the addition. To reiterate here, we have here's the existing extension down here. We're going to be building one floor on top of that existing extension, and then we have an open deck, which is open here, and then a fourth floor deck where we step back to the original line of brick for the fourth floor before stepping back again to the rooftop addition. Just taking a quick look at the detail here. So here's a section through the entire building. So here's that double height open space on this second floor balcony. A zoom up on the decorative railings there, and a zoom up on the detail on how that works. Taking a quick look at the rear cornice, which we felt was a distinguishing feature of the building. So we are looking to keep that. We are raising it slightly to the new roof line. But as we don't have an existing row or direct relationship to either side, we are still lower than our friends at 417 and slightly higher than our friends at 411. We didn't feel that this slight raise represented a significant deviation from the character of the building. So to take a look at the elevation again versus the existing. The The material, we're looking to use a brick for the brick piers, and then the metal decorative elements are bronzed steel, so they are steel that have been treated. The addition again is a gray stucco with black windows and black railings above the decorative part of the facade. Here, taking a look at the renderings. Plans, a fairly typical townhouse layout. We are not doing any excavation, so the existing mechanical cellar will remain. There is some foundation work required in the front to repair and support the new facade, but a bulk of the foundation is remaining. And again, no excavation, no extension, and no lowering of this floor. The garden floor is the kitchen with the living on the first, bedrooms on the second and third, an entertainment floor, and the office as part of the top floor addition. The bulkhead does have to empty out into the roof, which is primarily a mechanical area. Quickly, we were looking at the continuous cornice across the top. There was some feeling that while we wanted the building to represent its current use, and while the building has a continuous cornice now, we wanted to insert some elements to indicate the previous property line. So we have put a subtle little emblem in the center to represent the historic property line of the building. And lastly, just a quick precedent search on other buildings that have the planting balconies on the second floor. While we do feel that that was an original aspect of the building, it wasn't noted in the designation report, I don't believe, but these are, well, not prominent, not unheard of in the district. So that's about as fast as I can do it. Happy
Nice
to
work, Tom.
go back and take a look and answer questions.
Thank you. A couple of notes from me before we go to the committee and then the public. A couple of weeks ago, Carrie, my co-chair, myself, David Haloka, and Pamela had a briefing on this. Accordingly, we asked a lot of questions, got some answers, more detail provided tonight. We've also received information in advance from some of the neighboring buildings expressing some significant concerns around the structural integrity of the building and how whatever is being done here will or will not affect the neighbors. So inherently, all of those comments, of which we will hear some this evening, are going to make their way into our letter. Just laying that out before even anything is proposed from the committee this evening. But with that, I do go to the committee for any questions or comments directly on this. Please, straight to questions, actually, because comments will come out in the letter. David?
Thanks for the presentation. A few quick questions. How deep is the existing rear addition? How far does it project into the backyard?
It is roughly 6 feet.
Okay. What will be preserved of the building's exterior rear of the street facade?
Rear of the, well, the two sidewalls and the front facade will be preserved. The rear in its entirety will be replaced.
And the roof as well, right?
And the roof as well, yes.
Okay. Now you're carving out a lot of area on the lower floors and adding some on the top. What's the net gain or loss?
Well, the net gain is roughly 200 square feet.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thanks, David. Anybody else in the room? Greg and then Inga? Sure.
Related to you, Jeff, you said structural. You referenced structural during the
Structural and
Can you say another
engineering
word about
integrity.
that? Because I
Yes.
wasn't sure what you
Just
were referring to.
and I know we're going to hear of it in public. Neighboring buildings often have a lot of concerns as it relates to when there's going to be a full reno, any type of real construction happening in a townhouse with shared walls, or a row house with shared walls, or a roundhouse with them. Sure, Inga.
So I just wanted to mention, I've been watching this since they started putting up the mock, and neither of the buildings on either side are as high or even halfway as high as this mock. I'm looking at it from London Terrace, so I see the whole line. From what he showed us, it looked like the other buildings were higher next to it. They are not. I'm just looking at my pictures again. It is much higher than either building on either side of it or the whole row. I see the whole thing.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the committee for Tom? Anybody online? Pier or Betty, I see a hand. Go ahead, Betty.
I just have one aesthetic comment that I feel that the addition on the top is totally out of character with the building itself and the existing buildings nearby. That's my general comment.
Thanks, Betty. Pier.
Very quickly, I think the question I have is why do you want to put stucco for the addition on the top and not some other material, for example?
It's been a hotly contested topic. We were originally showing fiber cement boards, which we had preferred to do in our talks with staff at LPC. That was a material they felt might be too contemporary. In general, our feeling was that the addition should not replicate the building itself, so that when you do see it, you do not confuse it with historic fabric. So we did want to deviate. We didn't want to use brick, let's say. And stucco and basically what we'll call sort of a grayish material is very common for those top additions. And so we did feel that that material would blend in with the neighbors' additions, as well as separate itself from the building when it is viewed from those corridors on 9th Avenue.
I have one question, but why not metal?
Metal?
Yes.
Variety of reasons. One of them was cost. Our neighbors to the west there. My understanding is that they are also cementous and white. So it was to blend in. This is a fairly the idea is for it to be not celebrated. The views that are seen of it, we don't want to celebrate it. We want it to sort of fade away.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Pier. If no other comments, Pamela, final question before we go to the public, please. Where's our mic?
Very much. Hi, a couple of things. One of them being structural. This application says that it is for an alteration. It is really not an alteration. It is a basically total demolition of 2 Chelsea townhouses, which originally housed, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, 24 units, dwelling units were within those 2 houses. That number could be wrong. 18 is the number. So there were 18 families living in those 2 buildings. There will now be 1. This is apropos of the hearing we just had before this, the City of Yes. We are losing our population in Chelsea. That's one point. It's not a question, it's a statement. The other has to do with the structure, the interior structure itself, the gut renovation. What happens, and I asked this once before, I think, to the bearing wall between the 2 buildings? Is there any remnant of that will remain is one question. And the second one has to do with the extension. You say roughly a 6-foot extension off the north side, the rear side of the building. Can you be a little more accurate? We should know that number precisely, shouldn't we, since we're going to build it? My reason for asking is because it creates a tunnel effect for the existing windows of the house to the east.
Thank you, Pamela. Tom? On the bearing wall and on the backyard, please.
Yes, taking the bearing wall question first. So the foundation is remaining, but there will be a new steel superstructure that will take the place of the central wall. So the 2 floors that we are preserving, the the third and fourth floors that are remaining in place will be reattached to the new steel that is put in. So we will be keeping those only the cellar portion of that center wall. Let me stutter my way through getting you the exact. The reason I don't have it is we are matching the existing front. It's not a dimension that we had a control over, so it's a matching existing verifying field condition. So if you give me just one moment.
In the meantime, if members of the public want to begin lining up to speak, we'd appreciate that so we can efficiently move through that portion because Pamela will have the last question.
It is about 5'8" depending on exactly where you're measuring from, about 5'8" from the existing top line of brick out. So we have 6'3" here, so 6 3/4 inch for the full extension to that line there, and yeah, so 6 feet 3/4 inch.
Thanks, Tom. Members of the public, raise your hand and come on up to the microphone. Anybody on this application? Any hands raised online? A quiet Chelsea in the room this evening? Mike, it must be the Hudson or something. The spring weather. I don't know. Beautiful day. Okay, please do. Folks online, I know you have your hands up. Joanna, you're the first person. If you could just introduce yourself and let us know where you live, and then you'll be timed to 1 minute on your comment, please. The floor is yours.
Hi, my name is Joanna Lee. I've lived in Chelsea for 15 years, and I'm speaking to you as the president of the 411 West 22nd Co-op, and on behalf of all our residents, both adults and children who are in attendance with us this evening. After we learned about the redevelopment plan for 413 to 415, our adult residents thoughtfully discussed the plans and came to a unanimous decision, which we shared with the district manager. We have substantial concerns. These echo the issues that the community board members have just flagged, and they include the rear extension of the building, the rooftop addition, and the elimination of the party wall from a structural perspective. We thank the community for organizing this forum, and we'd urge the community board members to ensure that redevelopment situations like this, that they're handled in a way that balances our interests with the other parties and preserves and protects what's really special about our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. Next up is Alana.
I am actually going to introduce you to my daughter who wanted to share her perspective.
Hi, I am Sonoma Collison and I am 6.5. I live at 411 West 22nd Street with my mom, dad, and little brother. I don't want my brother window blocked. Thank you and have a good night.
Thanks, Sonoma. We appreciate that. Next up, Michael.
Good evening. I'm at West 23rd and 9th Avenue. I'm here to implore that you reject the proposed work occurring at 415 West 22nd Street, specifically the nearly additional 2-story floor from its current housing structure. I'm watching historical Chelsea disappear before my eyes to the whims of multimillionaires. Since the last time I spoke to CB4 in December, the rooftop structure has doubled in height and is even more prevalent and can be seen from several points on 9th Avenue. And as the architect said, I quote him, "We don't want to celebrate it." If I ask, why build it then? This addition has become an overall Frankenmansion, destroys the integrity of this historic skyline with its garish design rooftop. It is a protective area, and I'm rather distressed to see such work occur here. Not only will this addition be higher than the neighboring townhouses, which someone pointed out to the west, it'll impact natural light, frown all surrounding neighbors, affect our real estate price, the historical look and feel of this area, and disregard the work that neighbors have put into protecting this area. This is the pure greed of buying out several townhouses, which has become a trend and greatly impacts the quality of life for all our neighbors for several months with all the construction, as well as
Michael.
impacting. Thank you.
Thank you. Ronald?
Hi, I just want to corroborate the statements that have been made about the addition to the top. It is significantly higher than the adjacent buildings. So that's what I object to, the height of that addition.
Thank you. Next up, it looks like a crew at Jason's house right now. Jason?
Hi, everybody. My name is Jason Keck. I'm here with my family, my two daughters, Vivian and Marlo, who are 9 and 10, and my wife, Lucy. We live at 411 West 22nd Street on the 4th floor. I want to stand behind what Joanna said and the messages from our co-op, but really emphasize our concern about the addition of the 6-foot rear wall, in particular the balcony there. Would be looking into the 3 back windows of our apartment, which represent 2 bathrooms, 2 showers, and our girls' bedroom. And so in the formative years of their development, the last thing we want is, a party room on the 4th floor with people having visibility into the most private areas of our apartment.
Thanks, Jason, and the family for being here. Next up, Anthony.
Hi, I'm Anthony. I live on 23rd between 9th and 10th. I've been a Chelsea resident for close to 10 years, and I also own a small business in the neighborhood. This proposed multi-level addition, it is not just one story, has been disturbing. Not only do I see it right outside my apartment, but you can clearly see it from the street. And despite that fact, they have since raised the height and scope of the oppressive mismatched structure, further aiming to ruin the historic curb appeal. This addition will greatly reduce the light I receive in my unit, and as a result, this will decrease property value for a whole lot of folks, not just me. Tonight, I speak as an individual, but since I am on my co-op board, which does constitute 2 buildings worth of residents, I do feel the need to share that this is of great concern to us all, not just the half of us whose units face south. I think it's also important to note that creating this Franken mansion displaced a lot of residents who actively contributed to the overall local economy. That was already a big blow, but this addition up top aims to take even more from us locals. If we can't rely on the preservation of historical areas, then what's the point of having them reach such status? And why should my modest 1-bedroom that took me, like most people on here, years and years to afford and find and invest in, be dwarfed, diminished in value, and forced to literally live in the shadows? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes everybody online. Thank you all for being here tonight. Final call for anybody in the room. Christine, I'm sorry. I apologize. Christine? Sorry.
Hello, my name is Christine Berthet. I'm the co-chair of Transportation Committee, and I have a few questions. The first one is, what's going to be upstairs?
5th floor?
Yeah, whatever is the extension. Yeah.
It is a small
Just to be clear,
office.
folks, Ms. Berthet is a member of the community board, so we're giving her member deference right now is why she's getting to engage with questions and
Oh,
not
okay.
just
I'm sorry.
direct from the public.
Okay.
Thank you, Christine.
It's
Succinct,
currently
please. Thanks, Tom.
It's currently programmed as a home office.
And there is no other space in the building in 2 joint houses to create a home office.
Like most of our neighbors to the west there was a desire to take advantage of the available square footage and roof deck. And so, yeah, it was that was what the client is looking to do
Okay.
there.
I have a second question is, you have 2 doors downstairs. Why do you have 2 doors?
It was a complicated discussion. We ultimately decided that we did not want to disturb the street more than we had to, or remove one of the existing stoops. So in an effort to do as minimal amount of work on the front and visible parts of this building, it was decided to keep both doors and front stoops without changing the initial character of the building down there.
And what is the size, the size of the sidewalk between the gates you want to install and the tree pit?
So you mean as far as the width of the front areaway?
No, from the gate to the tree pit.
From
So
the gate to the tree.
the depths of the sidewalk.
The depth of the sidewalk, it is the same as all the way down. So I can get you that dimension, but there is you're talking there's no tree pit directly in front of us. It would be wider than at 411.
And where you're going to install a tree or two tree pits?
Well, unfortunately, as much as we would like to install a tree, there is a lamp post out front, and so we are not permitted to install a tree, so we'll have to do one offsite.
All right.
Christine, this is.
That's it. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
But so I
No,
just
this is your last question.
yeah, I just was going to make a statement. Can I?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
So I second what Pam says, that there were a lot of families, and considering what we just heard, in fact, the top roof should be an affordable housing. Thank you.
Christine, thank you. So with a round of applause in the room, Ms. Berthet, for you zooming in to give that to the committee. Oh, wait. But wait, there's more. Final public person zooming in. Jennifer, you have 1 minute on the clock.
Thank you. I'm in the 400 West 23rd building. I have a number of concerns, and I know there were some comparisons to neighboring, but this, to echo what others have said, this is definitely higher. And I would really hope that we can aim to preserve instead of just continuing to chip away, just because there's other examples. And I think the core of my complaint is really the space, that area where the roof is truly my main light source. And this height is going to impact my property value and my neighbors as well. And it's very sad to see it placed with a bulkhead, or a proposal with most of that being bulkhead.
Jennifer, thank you. I want to acknowledge we were joined by another CB4 member, but I'm cutting off comment because we're going to bring this back to committee. Alan Oster is here, a strong Chelsea advocate. So I want to acknowledge Alan, but I want to go to committee for a motion, a quick discussion, so we can move on to the next item on our agenda as well. Paul and then David.
I was not prepared to make a motion yet. I wanted to get some commentary in first, if that's okay. Fine, thanks. I agree with everybody here, especially given our previous presentation, that the diminishment of housing in our neighborhood is a travesty. However, this is an LPC application, and they don't deal with the number of units inside of a building. What they do deal with is front facade, rear facade, partition wall, sight from the street, and height. So it's an unfortunate situation that we're in, that this is going from 18 to 1. But I'd recommend we keep our focus on how can we get LPC to address the concerns we have about the historic fabric of this building. So to kind of address Tom's answer about the 2 doors out front, I suspect that's due to the fact that LPC would not approve the change of that entire facade and have 1 door and the removal of a stoop. So I think that what they did there is kind of give some homage to the fact that LPC does control this building and that we do have a say. I think in the past, I'm sorry, I want to go to sightlines. The sightlines from the street, I walked the area, that view from 23rd, and seeing the additional height. That bulkhead that provides access for the elevator is completely unnecessary. It's like, why go up that extra height? Don't put in the elevator and you don't have to go up that high. So it's a pretty simple solution to me to cut down immediately some of the height of that extension. I think the rear facade, we have often taken a position of kind of controlling the content of the facade and controlling how high up it goes. We have often supported extensions of tea party rooms, or whatever we call tea rooms. But we have not supported tea porches, but we have not supported such height going up as high. So we go to the parlor floor, but not higher. So the example he used previously of another property in the neighborhood that had step backs, we spoke very vociferously to make sure that the T-porch only went up to parallel level and did not go higher up. So that would be a consistent position for us to take to support that. I think that the partition wall between the two buildings, that is something that we can certainly say they should not remove that partition wall. That is fabric of the building that the LPC would take into consideration. And when you think about the double height lobby entryway, that is visible from the street. So that would be something that could be very clearly said that is a violation of LPC rules. So I'm suggesting we focus on those issues, keep the height down at the roof, look at the sight line, look at the site from the rear and the design of the rear facade. So
Thanks, Paul. David?
Yeah, this project fits within a bigger issue that we've been dealing with in Chelsea that has to do with the Landmarks Commission's policy of just acknowledging street facades. And by the way, the idea of allowing anything that isn't visible from the opposite sidewalk, that's just a matter of Landmarks policy. You know, people can see the backs of the buildings from neighboring structures. And Landmarks has purview over the entire exterior, and they have purview over the party walls, as we learned at the Gansevoort Market fiasco. But the bigger issue is that in routinely allowing developers and new owners to completely treat the buildings behind facades as tear downs so that they can then erect effectively new construction buildings that they're not additions. They're new buildings that are larger in the places where additions are claimed than the previous building was. There's no substance of the original volume that's retained. And the problem with this is that it's an invitation to developers to come and maximize the value of the underlying land. 442 West 22nd Street, an image of which was shown as a precedent, was actually bought over a decade ago by a Boston developer who got approval from the Landmarks Commission to demolish everything but the facade and replace the bulk of the house with a much larger new house. He then, without doing any of that work, resold the house for 1.6 times what he bought it for. That is how much more these buildings are worth dead than alive. And we have to get the Landmarks Commission to stop doing this.
And so, David, what do you propose we do to get the Landmarks
I'm
Commission
going to propose,
potentially
and
stop
you
doing
know, I
this?
just want to touch on rooftop additions for
David,
a moment.
I really want to encourage going to the motion.
The motion
because
is
we have lots to get
to
through.
reject this and say that we are open only to a rear addition extending no more than 8 feet from the historic rear wall of the main rear wall of the house, and no rooftop addition, and the rear addition only on the basement and parlor levels.
Thank you. Questions on the motion? Or Paul and then Inga.
Just a clarification, the extension right now is 6 feet and you're saying not to 8 feet. So that's inconsistent with the plan. So are you saying they could add on farther out? So you're saying extend farther out beyond the 6 feet?
There's a reason you're proposing 8 feet. It's because that's the historic depth of.
8 feet is what we have proposed in the past.
Yep.
I'll let Pamela speak.
And then
8
Inga.
feet is what traditional T-porches were.
Thank you.
They were also constructed of wood.
Inga?
I just want to make sure we add in that they keep the center wall, as Paul said,
In addition?
and definitely not the height. It's outrageous from every angle, my apartment including.
Mr. Lazaran?
Just second the motion.
Thank you for the second. The question has been called. The motion is to deny the application as proposed, given the rooftop extension, limit the rear expansion of the yard, and to maintain that center wall as well. Okay, on that summary, all in favor?
Aye.
Hands online, please, and cameras on for voters. Thank you. Any objections? Betty, you're objecting, or are you? Right. So no objections. Any abstentions? Present, not eligible. Tom, thank you for being here tonight, for answering the questions and for the information. We appreciate it. And thanks to the committee and everybody for that. Number 4.
Thank you.
Thank you. On our agenda, we have a presentation and discussion on what is called a 197A plan. This dates back to the mid-90s in Chelsea. It was a community-driven effort to create a zoning plan on land use for the neighborhood. You're going to hear from Tom Lunke and David Holoka about this. I forget who's going first. Tom, you're up. Come on up. Here's your mic.
Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, can I?
This is, you sure can.
Okay, thank you.
You want to just go on top of it?
Oh, sure.
Can't pick it up.
Yeah,
Sorry,
that's
there we
fine. Okay, sorry. All right. Ready? Okay. My name is Tom Lunke. I'm a 32-year resident of Chelsea and an urban planner with over 40 years experience and practice in this field. I was a student at Columbia University in the urban planning program when the Chelsea 197A plan was being discussed and drafted by my professors in consultation with Manhattan Community Board 4. Next slide, please. Master plans. The New York City Charter has a section called 197A plans. Since New York City does not have a comprehensive master plan for the entire city, it allows political districts, such as community districts, to create district-wide master plans. These land use plans are carefully reviewed and modified by the city's Department of City Planning to make sure that they meet the city's goals and objectives. The plans are also reviewed and voted on by community boards, borough presidents, the city council, and the city council. The Chelsea 197A plan was one of the first such plans adopted by the city of New York. Next slide, please. Zoning is the tool a city uses to implement the goals and objectives outlined in a master plan. After the 197A plan was adopted, I was appointed by the borough president to the Manhattan Community Board 4 and worked closely with Ed Kirkland and the New York City Department of City Planning to turn the 197A plan into Chelsea's 1999 contextual rezoning, a first in New York City. While some of the goals of the 197A plan were not adopted in the 1999 rezoning, such as the preservation of manufacturing uses and the creation of new affordable housing in East Chelsea, the 197A plan did create restrictions on how tall and dense residential and commercial buildings could be. The NYCHA campuses were not carefully studied in the 197A plan and were therefore given non-contextual zoning in 1999. They would later be analyzed in the 2021 Chelsea NYCHA Working Group report. Next slide, please. Oops. Adopted community plans and rezonings. This list highlights decades of community engagement in the shaping of Chelsea's land use. The 197A plan and its 1999 and 2005 rezonings have led to the creation of nearly 10,000 new housing units with 20,000 new residents. In addition, space has been added for thousands of new workers and tourists, all while maintaining the historic scale of the neighborhood. Next slide, please. The following 6 slides are quotes from the Chelsea 197A plan. Next slide. The Chelsea 197A plan embodies, quote, broad goals of preservation of historic character and community form, protection of the existing low-income housing stock, and provision of new affordable housing at a reasonable scale. Next slide, please. In order to minimize displacement, zoning must not encourage replacement of sound buildings by new structures. Next slide, please. And these are all quotes. Any community must change in order to live, but massive replacement of the existing building stock over a short period entails the destruction of community identity. Next slide, please. Besides individual hardship, displacement of persons with low income or social handicaps is likely to lead to homelessness. Next slide, please. In order to preserve the character and perception of community unity, zoning must not allow erection of walls of taller buildings on main thoroughfares that alter the feel of the community, dominate lower areas near them, and psychologically cut off one mid-block from another and isolate subsections of the community. Next slide, please. The human scale of most of the community and this distinctive form give Chelsea an identity as an attractive and livable community that would be destroyed by future development on an inappropriate model. The diminution of light and air, particularly in view of the lack of open spaces in traditionally built portions of Chelsea, would severely diminish the quality of life in the community. Next slide, please. The following two slides are quotes from the Chelsea NYCHA Working Group report. Next slide, please. No existing residential buildings in the NYCHA Chelsea developments will be demolished. Next slide, please. Development of residential infill sites must balance maximum capital financing for Chelsea NYCHA development renovations while respecting the NYCHA campuses and neighborhood context in height and bulk. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Next two-part presentation. David, you're up.
Okay. This part of the presentation will look at the way the 197A plan influenced Chelsea zoning in the blocks around the NYCHA campuses and how current zoning relates to the proposed NYCHA alternatives. We'll start by revisiting the concept of FAR.
Hold on 1 second. Give me 1 second.
I'm going to exit those.
Yeah. It is what it is.
And how about the thing across the top?
At least the best we can.
Okay, we'll start by revisiting the concept of floor area ratio, or FAR as it's known. The top row shows a hypothetical building lot with an FAR of 1. That means a building can be constructed on it with a floor area equaling the lot area. The floor area ratio is the ratio of allowed building area to lot area, which in this case is 1:1. The built floor area can be distributed over multiple stories as long as it totals no more than the lot area. The bottom row shows a similar example for a lot with an FAR of 2. Before looking at surrounding blocks, we'll look at the NYCHA campuses to see how their actual built area relates to their FAR. This image shows the Fulton Houses buildings in gray and their building lots in green. According to Zola, the city's zoning and land use map, the Fulton Houses buildings together have a gross square footage of 850,030 square feet and a total lot area of 261,943 square feet. Their combined square footage is 3¼ times their combined lot area. If their floor area was distributed over the entire campus's lot area, it would be more than 3 stories tall. That's a little over half what zoning allows with its current FAR of 6.2 over most of the site and 7.5 over the western part of it. I performed a similar exercise for the Elliott Chelsea houses. This diagram shows the built floor area of Fulton and Elliott Chelsea in dark gray. The lighter gray immediately above that shows how much more area can be added under the current FARs. Fulton Houses is built to about 50% of the allowed FAR, and Elliott Chelsea to about 80% of the allowed FAR. The lightest gray zone at top shows how much more floor area would be allowed under the NYCHA redevelopment project's rezoning alternative. The NYCHA rezoning would increase the FARs by nearly 1.5 times, allowing 2 3/4 times the current floor area of Fulton Houses and 1 3/4 times the current floor area of Elliott Chelsea. We'll now look at the surrounding blocks. This is a schematic map of the area in which north is down. Fulton and Elliott Chelsea are shown in gray, parks are shown in green. Areas in yellow are New York City landmarks or historic districts. The yellow area at the center is the Chelsea Historic District. The diagonally hatched area next to it is a potential district extension. This area contains over 100 historic buildings, about half of which are Greek Revival row houses, Chelsea's signature historic building type, including ones with commercial first floors directly across 9th Avenue from Fulton Houses. The yellow area across 10th Avenue from the Elliott Chelsea houses is the West Chelsea Historic District. The Avenue School building is in this district immediately across from the Elliott houses. The small yellow area between London Terrace and the Elliott Chelsea houses indicates 12 landmark row houses from the 1840s. The western half of the block thereon has other historic buildings. The small yellow area at the lower right in Penn South is the landmark Church of the Holy Apostles. This is an oblique view of the same map that shows the floor area ratio for each block or block portion before the recommendations of the Chelsea 197A plan were implemented in a 1999 rezoning. Fulton is at upper left in gray, Elliott Chelsea at lower right in gray. To give a visual sense of the allowed building bulk, this image projects blocks and block sections upward in proportion to their FARs. The idea is to create a kind of topographic map of the city's intention for Chelsea's development. Allowed floor area is represented as if it covered the entire lot with no open space. The darker gray bottom zone of the NYCHA blocks indicates their actual built square footage, with the lighter gray above showing their full FAR. The Google building and London Terrace predate modern zoning, and they are both substantially larger than what the FARs on this map allow. London Terrace was the largest apartment complex in the world when it was completed in 1930. Its floor area is about 10.4 times its lot area. Its impact is reduced by being bordered on 3 sides by 100-foot wide streets and having front gardens. But multiple blocks of buildings its size wouldn't have much light and air, as 24th Street attests. The 1999 rezoning significantly lowered FAR in historically sensitive areas, reducing it from 6 to 3 in many places. I'll refer to reductions in FAR as downzoning and increases as upzoning. This is post-1999. I understand Ed Kirkland had a lot to do with this rezoning, and I often felt his presence as I discovered how closely areas of reduced FAR related not just to landmark sites, but other historic areas worth respecting. Even the half block with the 12 row houses between London Terrace and Elliott Chelsea was downzoned. 23rd Street between 10th and 11th Avenues was converted from manufacturing to residential use and upzoned to allow large apartment buildings. The 2 southern Fulton Houses blocks saw a slight increase in FAR as a result of being rezoned from manufacturing to a residential district. I'll go back and forth a couple more times so you can get a sense of the change in direction of FAR. This is before 1999 and after, before and after. In 2005, the Special West Chelsea District was created to complement the High Line. Blocks over which it passed were converted from manufacturing to residential use and partially upzoned to encourage housing development. This is before the 2005 rezoning, and this is after. The western parts of the two southern blocks of Fulton houses fall within an area that had its FAR increased to 7.5 near the High Line where it crosses 10th Avenue. The tall Caledonia apartment building is within this area just north of Chelsea Market on 10th Avenue. These upzoned areas are generally away from the low-rise historic areas. Farther north, the buildings in the West Chelsea Historic District between 10th and 11th Avenues are very large and wouldn't be dwarfed by the new FARs. To their north, blocks approaching the planned high-rise Hudson Yards site were upzoned to FARs as high as 12. While the area across 10th Avenue from the Chelsea Historic District saw an increase in FAR, a height limit of 80 feet was imposed on it, together with incentives for transferring unused FAR to remote sites away from the High Line itself. You can see a relatively high FAR of 6 right across 10th Avenue from the General Theological Seminary, but the 80-foot height limit kept the building eventually constructed there to a contextual scale. Here it is on the right, facing the seminary across 10th Avenue. We'll now look at the proposed FAR increases for the Fulton and Elliott Chelsea sites under NYCHA's redevelopment project rezoning alternative. This is the current zoning, and this is what's proposed. Chelsea zoning to date has been painstakingly crafted over decades by community consensus to lower FAR in historic areas and raise it at a distance from them. To put it in context, the current NYCHA proposals FARs would be higher than any in this part of Chelsea, except for the blocks stepping up to Hudson Yards, increasing FARs from 6 for the most part to 8 and 12 within 100 feet of avenues. This would introduce steep discrepancies in scale between new construction and low-rise historic neighbors, including Cushman Row and Greek Revival row houses across 9th Avenue from Fulton houses. Something more like this than this. The additional bulk allowed on the Elliott Chelsea site would also cast Chelsea Park into shadow. These FAR-based maps may downplay the actual impact of the project. They obscure finer aspects of neighborhood scale and texture. A better sense of that comes from these NYCHA presentation materials. Here are the existing NYCHA campuses in their context. Here is the non-rezoning alternative, and here is the rezoning alternative. I'll end with this 1960s rendering of Fulton houses. Even though their towers were of locally unprecedented height, they stand back from both 9th Avenue and the side streets, allowing for plenty of the sort of light and air that zoning has always prioritized for 24/7 family life in residential districts. The perimeter buildings step down to match their historic context. Any further development of the NYCHA campuses should score no less for civic mindedness. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Excuse me. And Mr. Lunky, Mr. Holoka, under the time you told me it would be, so nicely done. Thank you for that. I'm sorry? Perfect. Just for a little bit of context on this, David and Tom had been talking about bringing this to the committee for several months. It had been laid over. We wanted to make sure it became public, which is what you had tonight. I'm not sure if there's any questions or comments. I know there's going to be some comments once I give a Chelsea NYCHA update as a part of our working group discussion. But Tom, David, thank you very much. There's no sort of business to come from this. It was very much an idea and a way to just bring some color and context, quite literally, to the 197A plan and the wider zonings of Chelsea. Thank you, guys. Our final bit of formalized business on here, a committee update or an update to the committee regarding the work being done between our meetings for the Community Boards NYCHA Working Group, which is with the co-chairs of Housing, Health, and Human Services, Chelsea Land Use, and the chair of our board, as well as with the development team and our elected officials. We meet about monthly, sometimes more, and most recently, about 3 weeks ago, we had what I think is appropriate to say was a fruitful and productive conversation for roughly one of the first times regarding the finances of the project and what the money, no matter how you look at it, whether it's public dollars or private dollars, where that's coming from, what it looks like, which informs a lot of the why as it relates to the market rate units that are being proposed, the cost differences from what was considered on the 2017 capital needs plan versus the 2022 capital needs plan, and the discrepancies between the working group's report back in 2021 and how that came to be in 2023. I'm not getting into the details of it right now, but a part of that is because of our work ongoing. Another part of a key update was pretty alarming, and that is that regardless of where anybody stands on today's proposal, the working group's proposal, we learned that NYCHA will be the one responsible for interim apartment repairs, not the private developer. This was a shock, and I'm seeing that in many of your faces. And what we found most appalling was that the entire reason a packed rat agreement was struck in the first place was to put a private developer in charge of renovation and then management of the facility. Come to find out, NYCHA would be responsible for roughly the next decade of repairs and continued maintenance on the facility. So basically, the same thing our neighbors have been already enduring for the past 30, 40 years plus, right? So with these two factors, sorry, get rid of my cough drop. Allergy season for me, I apologize. We will be having a letter work its way through the executive committee calling out the fact that it is not acceptable that NYCHA will be making the interim renovations. And in fact, the entire premise of this program, entire premise of this program was predicated on a private developer who can successfully and efficiently repair and then manage buildings happen. We expect this to be a pretty blunt, short and sweet letter calling this out. It will be to the development team as well as all of our electeds, because this was a big surprise pretty far into this game around the table already. So finances, interim repairs, and continued discussions as it relates to the results. What we're waiting on is responses to all of our comments as well as others from that draft scope of work hearing that we underwent. That's my update. I know there's lots of folks who are here tonight. We'll limit comments to 1 minute if anybody wants to say anything. Nobody had 2 minutes tonight, just to clarify. Nobody besides committee members had 2 minutes. If anybody wants to speak, they're welcome to come to the podium. Everyone will be allotted 1 minute this evening, as every agenda item was, and as was set as a... Jackie, nobody got 2 minutes tonight. Listen, we have 9 minutes. So if you have more than 9 speakers, assemble quickly, because we have another comment as well. So I'm going to have to do that. Huh? Well, we're not voting. But why don't you just do your...
All right, folks, I've been charged with moderating this part of the discussion. As a reminder, 1 minute each. And at 9:00, the microphones turn off, which means we stop.
I'm with you, Betty.
We can't hear. Jesse, we cannot hear.
Sorry. Now? Hello? Oh, okay.
Listen, you know, we don't want no demolition, and that's period. And if you guys walk through Fulton houses, you're gonna see all the trees. I've never seen our trees blossom, so blossom. So they're even protesting that they don't want to be killed, the plants and the flowers and all that good stuff that's going on in Fulton. Anyway, sometimes, I raise my kids to be humble, and I'm also a humble person. I love and feel compassion, but please be careful who you hurt and who you piss off on your way up, because you're going to need these people on your way down. And I hope I'm one of them when I see you come down. Thank you. Oh, Daniel. Un minuto.
Mi nombre es Daniel Ramírez, Fulton House. Solamente vengo a decirle, para el bienestar de todos los inquilinos de la ciudad de Nueva York, de la housing de Long Inco, no demolition, porque es nuestra vivienda que nos la quieren quitar a la fuerza, donde nadie nos representa ni nos defiende, solamente algunos somos los que hablamos por la voz del pueblo. Le pido de favor que no nos tumben nuestra vivienda, que es lo único que tenemos en el tiempo. Ok, gracias.
Salinas is using my minute. And this is from Salinas. HUD cannot approve the demolition. Fulton and Elliott Chelsea buildings do not fit the Section 18 demolition and disposition protocols. We do not have structural deficiencies nor faulty structural design. Our structural fills are adequate, and the settlement of earth below the building is solid. There are no site problems. There are no erosion or flooding. We are not even in a flood zone area. Our buildings have solid foundations. As a matter of fact, we had an earthquake, and there is no need to send inspectors out to our buildings nor into our homes. There's no physical deterioration of the neighborhood. According to HUD, demolition would be considered if there were changes from residential to industrial or commercial. We are the opposite of that. When the Elliott buildings were made, we were an industrial location, and yet it was suitable to build homes for families. We survived the industrial activities of the time, such as rumbling trains, 10th Avenue warehouse and surrounding factories. So now that our community has transformed, okay, and you start right there.
Okay.
Yeah, right there.
Salinas Miranda, Elliott Buildings. So now that our community have transformed and is dominated by residential buildings, we are that much more suitable to be here than ever before. We would be highly affected if a healthy grocer gets established into our community. This commercial establishment will violate HUD protocols and jeopardize the suitability of our site. Living in a construction zone for 20 or more years is surely unsuitable for housing purposes. Our health and mental well-being is at risk. Our buildings are not abandoned. FEC buildings are filled with families and life. This proposal is unethical, and everyone who is going along with this, who are shielding their eyes to the obvious, are heartless. Many of us will be affected in the worst way. Who will be accountable to the problems that will arise? I do not want to hear I was just doing my job. Everyone involved who is purposely going along with the manipulation and the lies will be held accountable one way or another. I promise you that. HUD, please do what is right and hold up onto your moral standard of ethics. Thank you.
Anybody else? Name and address in 1 minute.
I'm Lydia Andre, and I'm here on behalf of the 300 West 20th Block Association. You spoke tonight about a terrible surprise when all of a sudden you found out that who you thought would be responsible for repairs isn't going to be responsible for repairs, and instead it's going to be NYCHA. Well, I want to say, as a member of the larger Chelsea community, that's the first of many surprises. We were not included in the initial discussions and planning for the NYCHA campus. We don't have a seat at the table yet. We've asked our elected officials time and time again, how do they know what they think they know about this process? And after you reporting on what you just found out today, I don't know what you found out about the financials, but I have to say, we don't know. We still have unanswered questions, and I want to encourage every member of this committee to keep asking those questions and help us ask them too, because we really need some better answers. Thank you.
Okay, my name's Matthew Robinson. I live in 161 West 16th Street. I'm talking about David's presentation, which I liked very much. One error that I saw was that the streets are the same width from 8th Avenue, let's say, to 10th Avenue. They're not, at least I know in Fulton Street. If you're ever there, you'll see that it actually is wider. The street is wider. So when you're doing the zoning, not saying you, when whoever's doing the zoning, please be aware that the street itself is actually wider. So when you take the bus, the 14D, you'll see that street is actually wider. When you look at where Western Beef is, that street is wider. So when you're, it's not 60 feet, it's probably like 80 feet. So look carefully at that. So when they're doing the zoning, that they're calculated, either you're going to increase this, you're going to decrease the sidewalk, but the area has an error. There's a computation that you have to think about.
Mike Noble, I see your hand is up. We have 45 seconds, so go.
Yeah, just with respect to this letter that we addressed the repairs about, I think we've got to acknowledge that NYCHA should be responsible for the consequences of any repairs, whether they're done by them or Essence and related. And if we don't acknowledge that, they're not going to listen to us.
Mike, you're spot on. Okay, we have 30 seconds left. Betty's hand is up and Viren's hand's up. Betty, is
You're
your
not
hand
going
up
to call
from
on them,
previous?
Paul. If you can make your announcement, we're
But
going to go to
let me
closing,
make a
folks.
quick
We have 1
announcement
minute.
so everybody can hear this. For next month, we will be addressing this issue as a committee. We've had a lot of conversations about a lot of different things, and Carrie has asked that we think about taking a position of affirmatively
We can, here, here, go ahead. You know, the camera doesn't work, but they can.
So camera's not working, so people online can hear the statement. Carrie has asked that next month we sort of tackle more of an affirmative position of what we want to see in this NYCHA redevelopment. We've had a lot of conversation about what's good, what's bad, what's proposed, what's not proposed. So would ask you to come to next month's meeting with a concept of, you know, like David's talking about FAR concerns. We have bulk on height issues. We have displacement of tenants issues. We have a lot of factors that we're looking at. But what we want to try to address is what is our vision for these NYCHA campuses so that we can start to mold a decision as we move forward and we work with these various teams. So that request has been put out. All right. Do you want me to call on?
Thank you, Paul. Betty, Viren, we're going to call it. So thank you guys for being here tonight online. Thank you, everybody in the room. Could I have a motion to adjourn, please? Tina, you get that, even though you can't vote. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Bye, all. Yeah, I can hit end. Thank you, David.
Letter. Right, so when we did the draft.
No, but that's gonna come out of, that's what the exec could, am I hitting